For more on Iran and the possibility of new sanctions, we're joined by Trita Parsi, a specialist on US-Iran relations and a co-founder of the National Iranian-American Council, a non-partisan organization. Trita, thank you very much for joining us from Washington.
Thank you for having me.
So, after all of this time, where exactly does the West stand in talks with Iran over its nuclear program?
It's at a very odd impasse because we had very constructive negotiations in Geneva about 4 weeks ago. The U.S. was there working very, very closely with its partners, a unified Security Council. But now it seems like when the deal went back to Tehran, even though they had agreed to it in principle, the Iranians now are fighting amongst each other internally. And it seems like the entire diplomatic strategy of the Obama administration has been taken hostage by internal turmoil and political infighting in Iran.
Well, nevertheless, this issue has been around for a long time. How do Western negotiators know that this is not being used as an excuse?
Well, first of all, I think the deal actually was quite positive for the Iranians as well. Part of the reason why it was a good deal was because everyone could essentially say that this was a win-win. But when they went back to Tehran, the dynamics of the internal politics of Iran came into play. You could see that because the fraud elections in Iran this past summer is not over with. The opposition is still challenging President Ahmadinejad. They do not view him as a legitimate president of Iran. And that fight is not over. It's continuing, and the nuclear deal is becoming a target of that infighting.
Explain what you mean by when you say it was a win-win, because hasn't Iran to some extent already done away with the idea of sending its enriched uranium overseas?
Well, I think part of the reason why the Iranians view this as a success is because they had negotiations with the United States without preconditions, and there wasn't a demand for a suspension of enrichment. And they probably read the agreement to be an implicit acceptance of Iran enriching on its own soil. It's just a higher level enrichment that would take place on foreign soil. Right. So in that sense, that was something that the Iranians had been looking for.
So then, is there any real reason to believe that Iran will ever accept Western demands to curb its nuclear development, its nuclear ambitions?
Well, I think that's a good question right now, because if the problem right now is not with the deal itself, but with internal fighting in Iran, in which the Iranian elite is at each other's throat to the extent that they're not capable of making decisions of this magnitude, then that puts the United States in a very tough position, because it means that there's little it can do to affect the equation, because the equation is not in the negotiations, it's inside of Iran, in its political elite.
And very briefly, President Obama came to office pledging to talk to our foes. Is there any evidence that his approach is paying off with Iran?
Well, it's too early to tell. I mean, remember, when it comes to Iran, there's only been active negotiations for 8 weeks. You can't make a judgment after 8 short weeks. You certainly can say that diplomacy has been exhausted in such a short time period. We've had sanctions on Iran, for instance, for more than 20 years, and we're still inclined to pursue sanctions. And after 20 years, those sanctions have not produced anything in particular. So we need to give diplomacy a little bit more time to be able to make an assessment as to whether it's produced any results or not.
All right, Trita Parsi, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.